It's amazing what you can learn in school. I learned about framing the issues at Tacoma Community College. Preemptive framing, they sometimes call it. For example, I know that a fossil tape like this doesn't amount to anything. I mean, anybody with any sense realizes that the so called sexual revolution should have taken offense at a deaf child being put on a secret trial for their life over having some hanky panky in a city like Pittsburgh. But it didn't happen that way. One reason is because the Lakey Chops, the NAACP, enjoyed putting a white on death row. I'm not preemptive framing when I say that this tape is about the danger to deaf people in Pittsburgh, Seattle, and to a lesser degree Tacoma, where there's fewer deaf people. Deaf people are endangered by this new minority movement as well as the Trumpy-Toon army. Endangered for being deaf and for no other reason, because that's the only thing that really anybody can claim about me is I'm deaf. And they make a big stink about my, you know, saying something like, would you repeat that? Oh, you're interrupting. Oh, see, he doesn't respect boundaries. That's the sort of mentality they put into play to cover for crime. Now, preemptive framing can be less dramatic than something like that. For example, a professor, Brian Durchin, told this story. It's a story that's been told many times from sellouts from the 70s and 60s. You know, I used to hear Mitch Hartman, who loved the Grateful Dead, talk about what a wise man Nixon was and how he didn't realize it when he was a kid. And Durchin had a similar story about, pardon my pronunciation, um, of LBJ, you know. Oh, I thought that, oh, when I was a kid, this, but now I comprehend the greatness of them. You know what I'm saying? And you're supposed to say when you get your A, oh, I comprehend the greatness of them now too. Oh. So, bring up the framing. It's like, you know, if you think of the place where they found old um, library books in the Victorian book, The Time Machine, or you know Ayn Rand's We the Living or something, where they find the dusty book that confirms their identity as human beings, and they all get agog about it. You understand what I mean when I say this is a fossil, but the aggressors have to preemptively frame this is Biko. And everybody goes, "Oh, I see, it's Biko." You know, you're supposed to. Well, anyway, I should also point out I believe basically in the philosophy of Ayn Rand in the sense that if you put out pearls for people, they will reciprocate by compensating you. And it didn't work out that way. It doesn't work out that way because the title of this piece is Leslie One Think Again. Because preemptive framing says we live in a society of laws and morality and ethics. And then so Leslie one because we live in a society of laws and ethics. That's not true. We live in a society of crime that puts crime first. And that's what this is about. It's not about Leslie so much, although I'll mention some things about her. And if you want to verify that, I have a letter from the federal magistrate. His name is from the U.S. District Court, State of Washington, Honorable Richard A. Jones. There was another woman named Michelle down there. It's case 322CV05408RAJ, document 16, the 7th day of July, 2022. What this proves is that they were presented with evidence of genocide pornography, this being one of the examples. a testimony of torture. And they just said, case dismissed. They didn't say, don't worry, the police have been advised. They didn't say, we take it seriously and are summoning an advisor's you, since you're obviously not an attorney. They gave me verification that I tried, but that's not going to matter to the Lakey Tops end of the ACP, who had a dude named Lynch on the bus, with a short name Lynch, I should say. So it's not going to matter to people who don't want to answer questions I named out here. If Cersei would have sided with the people who killed Diana and confirmed the Ukraine's right of self-defense, why are the Kennedys also standing with the people who killed her? That's strange. Yet that's the truth. The people who killed her represented Midori Goto, Aung San Suu Kyi, Mitch Hartman, Hines, Shifty, Stone, Putin, Clint Eastwood, and Princess Di. So that brings us full circle back to Di and JFK. So we know some things about this comprehensive setup whereby we hear that JFK would have sided with his own killers over helping an innocent person who was deaf. I mean, we hear that from Pittsburgh day in and day out for 50 years. And when somebody says, how do we know that? They say Ringo Starr. Oh, because Ringo Starr doesn't want to side with a deaf kid. Therefore, JFK would have sided with his own killers. That's what it comes down to. So I've been told, why don't you compromise? Why don't you admit that the letters were negligence in the murder of John Lennon, throw yourself at the mercy of Ringo Starr? Okay, so I'm going to talk about that. Here's what Ringo Starr did. Leslie Katz, I said to them this was incriminating. I was told that Leslie's are these things that spin and how when you play the organ. You know, gangs like Kansas who break things when they're on tours and then say they feel like they're in the Beatles movie, The Help and stuff. You could see that I was a traumatized child and then went right on smoking hash in my presence. And then they have this organ that spins with Leslie's, as I said, you know, as a pun on Leslie's, when all the Leslies of the world begin to scream, you know, which is, you know, the sort of lyric that Peter Gabriel likes. You know, tell me why, silent, you try to impress me, you know, because there are all those people who get a look of mysteriology in Pittsburgh and try to capture your attention with their brand of silence, you know. I was right doodling to them, you know, like Exler. How's that for a name? Exler. He comes on to me, you blew it, you know, and he's like the devil and the angel, you know, you blew it in a cartoon. And the other devil and the angel from Pit Loss, I said, it wouldn't have been me. And so, you know, I was nursing heartache. I said, I wanted love, you wanted rape. I'll never forget my ineptitude, which was the impingement. And Richard Starkey said, see, we got him on helter-skelter charges. Do you, don't you want me to make you? And they have Mancine doing the snuff film thing that they consecrated for the Bob Dylan song about JFK when COVID went out. The Pepperland virus went off, number two. And Cersei was served, you know. So do you don't want the snuff film syndicate of Manson Cinema, and they poisoned me in the mouth and all that. So what he has me in the helter skelter, you know, John Lennon, and they rip and murder Shannon Harps to make it all real dramatic, you know, for the Lakey Chops or not. So you have this helter skelter, you know, dialectic in place. Did he? Don't he want me to make? Yeah. Yeah, and this was Leslie Katz's spot. She had a good clean bush that she used to let me take for hours every night, but we didn't do it was a lesbian relationship, you see. So they they blame me for feeling kicked in the head, rejected, and for saying that she had the right to be a queen mistress. I would never impose on a woman who was unready and unwilling and shying off. I just wouldn't do it. It's not me. And they say, "Oh, we don't know about that," and they start tuning into the neuroplasm of rejection, right? So I'm just writing doodles about what's going on. And then we go start spotlights the queer bait. Could have saved John Lennon, and we're going to use that as a cover up for the Mount Desert Island AIDS experiment. And I'm like Peter Lorre now. I mean, little Jimmy Queerball, he's being blamed for the AIDS attack and the murder of John Lennon too. And so instead of saying what I was supposed to say, which I was buddies with Casper, he didn't beat me. We're good, Pittsburgh. We want to go along. We want to sign King Crimson's uh, absolute control over the United States of America. I said I didn't realize that John Lennon was pretending to be killed so that he could pull this revenge for Hiroshima on a little boy. And they didn't like that. You see, Ruth Hammer, was a friend of Dolly Myron's, and back in Michael Todd, back when she took a sabbatical, I was in sixth grade. And Hammer Films came and slammed me in the head. They brutally tortured me, planted the Yonagono espionage script on me. And they had to do that Richard Araujo, who was Hammer's favorite. And Richard Araujo and Hammer took us downtown to hear the judge. And Richard Araujo had a nice little correspondence going with the judge. Here come the judge. Well, here come the judge. Richard Araujo comes and delivers the virgin of the two virgins, Pussy Bowl, to Jimmy Creary. And Richard Starkey. This guy's name is Richard. I also get a letter from Department of Education, who I consider when I'm doing public service in Edinburgh. Richard. You know, the people standing next to Lennon the night that they say he was done in looked like Richard, Queen Elizabeth's cousin. And people stand next to Reagan the night he comes out and waves to me, the day after he comes out and waves to me. Richard, looks like Richard. And they both look alike, you know. So you have these Richard look alike. And all of these Richards come, Richard. I'm not saying that Richard Mononga's Spring in Africa has anything to do with any of this in his Sergeant Pepper outfit. Because my friend Richard was murdered. I don't want anything to happen to nobody. And I'm extrajudicial about any of this. I believe in of law. It's not a world of crime. I don't believe in a world of crime. But Richard controls the nation of crime, the federal government and stuff. Richard considers himself blessed. He can do anything because he has this claim that Richard Araujo, the script for fulfillment. And that's why JFK would have sided with the authors of the Texas School Book, because Queerball was so perfect. Okay, so that's the situation. Now, what that means is that Ruth Hammer's friendship with Dolly Myron shows. Dolly Myron, you see, was in the books with Sean Straub, who witnessed what Lennon and Mark David Chapman had worked out. He was a green self-killing. He was Messianic Jewish, gave himself AIDS, and formed the Green Party unit. So he represents the people who knew, like Moon Unit Zappa, and all had rules. She stands with Pussy Riot, Foucault, Moon Unit Zappa, the people who say, who cares about AIDS, right? And you shouldn't be allowed to escape and come around with their Yoko Ono's injection, Putinese, Trumpy Tune, Oliver Stone terrorisms. Do you or don't you want me to inject you? You know, and death wish stuff. So they have this situation going. with the people who had it all mapped out, like Dolly Hammer, Gail Burstyn were right on top of each other with Richard Araujo. Morandini was in aerospace science. So you have like Blumenfeld and Gelomini, which is like Blumenfeld, Meanies, and Fulton Mini, which was a porn place. And they have me at Fulton School with Gelomini's jailbait, locked up in a shack to make sure that the genocide pornographers get their licky chop blackmail for Richard Araujo. And it's a hollow, you know, it's a Holocaust, Hollowwood, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania Klan psychology program that Ringo Stark, just happened to Carry Geista, Starburst can't tang. Just happened to time with Richard Araujo Stark, Carry Gasta, and Gista. From the Holocaust survivor community of Liquor Chops Porno in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, PA. So you have Mercy. So you have the situation all pot boiled, bubbling, boiling. You have, Roman Polanski's witches and Macbeth flashing their cootie and stirring the pot, because all this comes from Hollywood. And Lennon's Satyricon, he's going to give a blank check of the U.S. government to the Croco Groner for the sin of Hiroshima, which I was said to represent the way Lena Shaker killed Tupac Shaker. I mean, who cares? They don't care. They're just tossing around word derby. He's not Biko. He's a white. Where do you get the idea you're Biko? I mean, it's an endless stream of bizarre mentalizations that comes from a cult syphilitic named Penis Sinfield and his attaches, Amanda Harcourt and Pino Gabriel from the Yoko Ono Criminalopolis with Spike Oldley. Yes, Spike Oldley. He's going to come to the rescue. So this is when they've made Flame Over Africa, genocide pornography, and Joe Manchin's saying, well, if you don't like it, you go boil your bottoms in a climate change world. So they got it all fixed up to, pull the hanky panky. And as for the girl, I didn't know she was a virgin. Not that the reality check is going to go very well, but they were like, I said, well, we're going to get married. We do. And they're like, so. In Pedigree County, in the Hanky Pank State, because the pedigree says you belong in a eugenic struggle over the two virgins pussy bowl, and Yeltsin did, over Midori Goto, amen. And San Antonio, Reno, the UW dialectical Lakey jobs of the United Nations. And that's what they do. It translates from, Peter Frupp. It says that this sound that comes through his radar is an accelerated communique from J.G. Bennett. And the yada 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 yada, it comes out of the Senegalese psychopath from ISIS warriors in Britain. Is accelerated intonement from the Asiata Shamish and Peter Frupp. And so they have this whole, and supposedly there's a group of people who say that people have, the ex-girlfriends who old boyfriends still sort of keep in touch with and make sure they're okay and worry about during crises like COVID-19. You don't think that it's terrible that my ex-girl I wanted to marry had slept with others. Even when I was dating, she had boyfriends who just so known. And it was okay with me. She was my friend. So, and I was her, she was like that. And there are a lot of other people who are like that. My sister says it happens every day. So supposedly there's a coalition that doesn't think very highly of child kidnappers and people who, for academic demonstration projects from UW Dialectical, mowed down elementary school children in Texas, and all the other morally sophisticated, purist things that Yoko Ono has going on. There are people who don't really go along with that, who even some believe, like John Lennon's music was liberationist of groups like Pussy Riot. They were strategically there to set up a lemmings, all these people who want to have sex blow themselves up with these vows. And then we'll have them return back to the Orthodox Church. And that was all in writing. And people at first said, well, that's what happened. Oh, Zappa said, no, it was the CIA. So everybody got derailed from that. But then we find the Orthodox writings. And who should be, that Greg Starcynic is a good example. Greg Carl wrote a whole series of things confirming that this is all true and that he was in on it. And Greg Star Cynic, right? Cynic, arsenic, Star Cynic, and Old Lace, right? So, I mean, Greg Carl and Richard Rougeau go way back. Richard Carl was his father's the military nut. He used to play war games that led to the bird bath and stuff in our neighborhood. It's all Jimmy Queerball. And my eyes were wide with all this. You gotta be kidding me. Like you wanted something, I was like, I was in love with this girl and she was leaving me. And they were like, helter skelter, helter skelter. And then I tried to get help from Martha Gellhorn. She said, I recognize a great sense of urgency. And they were like, urgent, urgent. And that's the mentality. It's fiendish, parochial, it's lewd, it's childish, but it comes trot, trot, trot down the pike from Ringo Starr every single time. And they say, oh, they're going to lynch me because I tried to get help in warning out to people. That means I'm no good, right? I'm trying to warn people that the Licky Chops pornographers are coming for them from genocide pornography rings in Britain. And they have Oliver Stone going on having a good time with Putin, who Peter Gabriel and Boris Obama had on the line for David Juffin, the leapfrog oligarchs put all this together. And they want us, no counts, to get into a military and choose sides, and they'll take us out and vaporize us in the forest of Fontainebleau. Even the book I found about General Faucher was written by Richard Crane. But the truth is that JFK rejected ideas like Northwood, which was to trick Americans and kill some for strategic purposes. I don't believe there's really much chance that JFK would have gone along with pepper viruses like COVID and AIDS. I don't know what Princess Di did. I know that her crowd knew about it by the time she was done it. And Ringo Starr's take on that was that I'm to blame for it. But I mean, but he blamed, you would not believe who he blames for things. He points his fingers at, 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 um, at Jeannie Tamburo, a mentally retarded deaf girl with epilepsy, and says she has to be compensate the fact that Leslie was still a virgin by being raped. This is his mind, the mind of Greg Starcynic. I mean, Ringo Starkey, because Gary Geester and Gaster, defending Starburst, Tang, this is his mind. He's determined to project his mind on everything, and they call it preference theory. People would rather stick needles in deaf children and make them scream than educate them in sign language, you know. And you have all these people like this dude Richard, who says case dismissed when he sees the evidence of genocide. He said you have his Honorable Richard A. Jones. Um, yeah, And it's always Richard, of course. Richard owns, well, you had to think they have Benny in charge of the January 6th because it's Benny and the Jets, right? Benny, Benny. And they're all doing Her Majesty's bidding. And NP has Nancy Pelosi has your back. You know, for all we know, so I don't really get it. I'm still trying to figure it out. You know, you can help me a little bit if you want. You can explain to me, for example, they say JFK, who I love, Princess Di, who, you know, I had nothing against, would have supported the Ukraine resistance to Putin, which I basically believe is true. And Clint Eastwood, like Princess Diana, he's all banzai about what happened. And Princess Di had some friction with Pittsburgh over Heinz that Shifty exploited to get to Searcy. And the Heinz people put Rosine on me, who had Searcy's middle name. So you're telling me that JFK would have supported um, the Green Party's adoption of Roberto Clemente's name as a signifier in the rape of a mentally retarded deaf girl who had epilepsy over a lyric by the Beatles called Helter Skelter being read into and impinged on a girl who was still a virgin after dating the queer bait for 2 years. And I wonder if you're speaking through your Ringo Starkey mouth. You know, because I don't think that JFK would have taken anything but offense at the idea of Roberto Clemente, either of their names being used to rape Deaf Genie. But we have it from gospel that he would have. So how we figure this out, you know, what gives would connect to Gucci? What gives would connect to Gucci? And who is connected to Gucci? We know he's with Goto and Anson and the Croquet Register. So we know that he's with Donald Toon and that Stone met with Putin. We know that. So we figure that Putin, well, how's that? Maybe this is so Putin and Hans see eye to eyeball, maybe. I'm trying to figure this out. Wait a minute. Stone and Putin see eye to eyeball. Stone sees eyeball to eyeball with Cyril Wecht. And we don't know what Cyril Wecht stands with Harris Wofford, but Harris Wofford stood with Leslie Katz, and Harris Wofford worked with JFK. I got it. Now we know that Harris Wofford proves that JFK would have approved the rape of Deaf Genie and the murder of his niece, right? We know that. It's gospel from Starcenic because Helter Skelter. Do you or don't you want me to do what next? That's what he wants on everybody's mind. Rickett Starkey and Pianist Gabriel doing. Do you or don't you want us to do what next? And they say JFK was down with them. Yes, sir. You ask Real Change. Real Change has a Smith and Wesson. Uh-huh. They'll tell you what to do. Uh-huh. It's all Richard Rougeau. He gave you Rougeau, so you don't question the Rougeau.